The cold rain pattered against the glass of the hotel lobby in downtown Chicago. A man named David stood in the doorway, shaking off the last drops of water from his coat. It was late afternoon and he was lost. With a wrinkled map in hand and a frown on his face, he scanned the lobby, hoping for help. "Excuse me," he said to a young woman at the concierge desk. Her name tag read Emily. Her eyes sparkled like the city lights outside. "Can you help me?" Emily smiled and nodded. "Sure. It's just 2 blocks down. You'll want to turn left when you exit." David breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you so much." As she pointed him in the right direction, David noticed a television mounted on the wall above the fireplace. A news broadcast was playing. The screen flickered with the words "Breaking News" in bold letters. Curious, he turned his attention to the TV. A serious-looking anchor spoke directly into the camera. "We interrupt this program for breaking news. A man was apprehended this afternoon for disturbing public order and threats of violence." David squinted at the screen, his heart racing. The image of the man flashed momentarily, his face blurred but familiar. David's heart dropped. It looked like someone he knew. They had crossed paths in college, and the memories flooded back. This man had once been his friend Mike. Just then, the image of Mike faded into view. The words struck David like a punch. Panic. That couldn't be right. Mike had always been passionate but harmless, the kind of guy who would argue about philosophy over dinner, not disturb the peace. David felt a knot forming in his stomach. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It felt surreal, like a scene from a movie, but this was real life. He stepped closer to the TV, his heart racing, unable to tear his gaze away from the screen. Then the news transitioned to showing clips of the chaos in the streets, not just a report, but real people, real fear. David could almost feel the palpable tension through the screen, as if he were there. Panic washed over him. How could this have happened? Emily, still at her desk, noticed David's reaction. "Are you okay?" He nodded but struggled to find words. "That's..." Lee leaned in, her curiosity piqued. David took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. "His name is Mike. We were friends in college. I haven't seen him in years. I can't believe he's..." Emily glanced back at the TV. "Is he really violent?" "I don't know," David admitted, feeling a wave of confusion wash over him. He always seemed to have this fire in him, but violent, no. As the footage continued to roll, showing more chaos, David felt a pull, something compelling him to act. He'd just leave, or should he reach out? What if Mike needed him? Emily asked softly, her gaze fixed on David. There was a concern in her eyes that he found comforting. "I don't know," David replied. I've got to do something." The urgency filled his voice as he turned away from the TV, determination replacing shock. In a rush, he stepped outside, the sound of the rain replaced by the urgent hum of the city. He could still feel that knot in his stomach, but it was no longer paralyzing. He weaved through the bustling streets, people rushing by, oblivious. His mind was consumed by thoughts of Mike, who he was, who he had become. It was a 20-minute walk to where the report claimed Mike had been last seen. As he walked, he recalled their college days, the late-night discussions, the laughter, and the plans they'd made for the future. Life had put them on different paths, but Dave never imagined their stories would intersect like this. He finally reached the scene, the park where Mike had often spent time philosophizing about freedom and society. Surrounding it were police barricades, flashing lights, and a crowd of onlookers. David's heart raced as he approached, trying to take it all in. He spotted a familiar face standing off to the side. It was Linda, another friend from college. She looked pale and distraught, her hands shaking. David called, rushing toward her. When she turned and saw him, a wave of relief washed over her face. "David." "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice trembling. "Did you see the news? They took Mike. He wasn't himself." David inquired, trying to grasp the situation. Linda's eyes filled with tears. "He lost his job a few months ago. I think he was struggling. I tried to reach out, but he stopped answering." David felt the weight of her words. "I should have been there for him," he said, guilt washing over him. "It's not your fault," Linda insisted, but David wasn't listening. A mix of emotions swirled inside him, guilt, sadness, rage. He wished he could turn back time. Suddenly, a loud voice broke through the crowd, a police officer barking orders. "Everyone, please step back." David felt a surge of anger. "No." Shouted, pushing his way toward the police line. Linda called out behind him, but he was already moving. Adrenaline coursed through him as he approached the officer. "Please, my friend is involved." The officer looked him over, a mix of skepticism and concern in his eyes. "You can't go in there, please," David pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "I might be able to talk to him." For a moment, the officer hesitated. Then, to David's surprise, he nodded and gestured for him to follow. "Hey, but you need to stay calm." With a rush of hope and fear, David followed the officer. They moved through the crowd, past the barriers, and toward a makeshift area where Mike was seated on the ground, hands restrained. His face was pale, but his eyes glimmered with that familiar fire. The very same fire David remembered, though it flickered erratically now, as if it might extinguish at any moment. David called, rushing forward. Mike's gaze sharpened, and for a moment confusion crossed his face. "David." "What? I saw the news. I came as soon as I could," David replied, kneeling down before him. "What happened? You're not like this." Mike laughed bitterly, shaking his head. People change, David. I didn't want to. David felt a pang of sadness. You can get through this. We can work together. Let me help you. Tears filled Mike's eyes. I got angry. The world feels like it's falling apart, and I just wanted someone to listen, to understand. David reached out, placing a steady hand on Mike's shoulder. I'm listening. You're not alone. You never were, Mike asked, his voice dropping to a whisper filled with despair. David pulled in a deep breath, steeling himself. You have to trust me. I'll talk to them. Behind them, the officer observed intently, realizing David wasn't just a friend, he was a lifeline. As they spoke, the atmosphere shifted. David felt the weight of hope and despair intertwine, a fine line between salvation and chaos. Mike's breathing steadied as he started to open up about his struggles, fears, and regrets. Each word spilled out like a shattered dam, revealing the turmoil underneath. David knew they were fighting against more than just the situation at hand. They were fighting years of unspoken pain and misunderstanding. The world did feel like it was crumbling, but together they could rise above it. As they talked, the loud chatter of the crowd faded into the background. David focused only on Mike, hoping to guide him back to safety. The rain began to ease outside, echoing the shift inside that quiet moment they shared. Finally, the officer moved forward, cautiously optimistic, listening to the dialogue unfold. We can work on finding a way to get help for your friend, he said. David nodded, feeling the tension ease, but a new resolve filled him. This wasn't just about Mike anymore, it was about reaching out, about connection in the midst of chaos. Thank you, Mike whispered, a glimmer of hope forming in his eyes. I would never, David replied firmly. There, in that chaotic scene filled with flashing lights and concerned faces, a small fire began to refuel. It wasn't just for Mike, but for David too, for the friendship they had lost and the path to finding it again. As the sun began to set behind the clouds, casting a soft golden light over the park, they knew a new chapter was beginning, one filled with understanding, trust, and hope. He stood at the bustling intersection, the pulse of the city thrumming all around him, a stark contrast to the deafening silence in his mind. Jake glanced at the map in his hands, the rain misting down on the paper, making the ink bleed and blur. It was supposed to be a simple trip to visit a friend just a few streets away. But now here he was, lost in the heart of downtown, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds, the scent of wet asphalt, and a storm brewing in his chest. Excuse me, Jake called out to a passing woman, her briefcase nearly hitting his shoulder as she hurried by. You helped me, and disappeared into the sea of people. Jake felt a wave of frustration wash over him. How could a city feel so alive yet so isolating? He turned back toward the lobby of the nearby hotel where a massive TV hung suspended from the wall. It flickered with the urgency of a breaking news banner. Curious, his eyes drifted toward the screen. What kind of news could break the rhythm of this vibrant city? An anchor with a serious expression interrupted his thoughts. We have breaking news. A man is in custody after a violent incident that led to chaos in the downtown area today. Jake squinted at the screen, his heart racing. The face that flashed briefly was one he recognized all too well, Tom, his old college roommate. A surge of disbelief hit him like a thunderclap. He whispered to himself, his pulse quickening. This couldn't be right. Tom wasn't violent. They had shared late-night talks about art and dreams, bonding over their shared love for creativity. This news report had to misunderstand something, anything. As the anchor detailed the incident, Jake felt the weight of 1,000 memories crash around him. The art festivals, the coffee shops they filled with laughter, and the nights spent discussing their futures. How Tom had always believed he could change the world with his art. But this wasn't the Tom Jake remembered. A chill ran down his spine. His heart ached for his friend. He had lost touch over the years. Life had swept them on different currents. Maybe if he'd checked in more, maybe if he hadn't stayed caught up in his own life. A voice broke him from his thoughts. Emily, a familiar face from college, stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the screen. Did you see? It can't be true, Jake replied, still locked on the TV. People change, she said quietly, sadness creeping into her voice. The news switched to video footage, chaotic scenes of shoppers fleeing, frightened faces, and police sirens blaring. Each pulse of the lights mirrored the pounding in Jake's chest. He couldn't shake the déjà vu. This felt like a scene from a movie, absurd yet achingly real. Jake wondered aloud, grappling with his disbelief. Emily looked troubled. That's exactly why we need to act. With resolve hardening within him, Jake made his decision. Before Emily could respond, Jake turned and left the lobby. Outside, the air felt electric, heavy with urgency. He could still see the images of chaos flashing on the screen behind him, and he knew he couldn't just stand by. He had to try. As he walked, memories flooded in like the rain around him. Tom painting murals in college, creating a world alive with color. How he would throw himself into projects, passionate and relentless. What had happened to change him? Block after block blurred together, his feet guided by instinct. The city was a jungle of noises, the honking cars, laughter, and murmurs of strangers, all drowned by his racing thoughts. Finally, he arrived at a police barricade near the scene of the incident. Blue and red lights spun wildly, illuminating the faces of onlookers. Jake's breath quickened as he approached. Caution tape fluttered in the wind as he moved closer to the crowd, people whispering anxiously. A voice called. It was Mike, another friend from college, wringing his hands as he stepped forward. "I can't believe it. I need to see him," Jake said, determination surging in his chest. "He's not violent. Dude, don't you understand? This is serious," Mike responded, his voice shaking. "The situation is way out of hand." The words hit Jake hard, but he had to keep going. "I need to talk to him." Before Mike could argue further, Jake stepped through the barricade, heart in his throat. The officer standing guard turned to him, a stern expression plastered on his face. "Sir, you can't be here," he said, blocking Jake's path. "Please," Jake begged, voice laced with urgency. "I'm a friend, I know him." The officer hesitated, eyes scanning Jake's face, searching for sincerity. Then surprisingly, he nodded. "You have 5 minutes." Jake didn't waste a second, nodding as he hurried past, chasing the flicker of hope that filled the tangled air. As he approached the police vehicle where Tom was seated, it felt surreal. His heart raced, every beat marking the gravity of the moment. Tom sat there, shackled and pale, a shadow of the vibrant person Jake once knew. When their eyes met, a flicker of recognition passed through Tom's expression, but confusion and fear clouded it. He whispered as if unsure whether to believe his eyes. "I saw the news," Jake replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "They think you're dangerous. Doesn't matter what you know," Tom said, his voice heavy with despair. "They don't care. You have to tell them your side," Jake insisted, urgency bubbling in his chest. Tears gathered in Tom's eyes. "I lost it, Jake. I didn't think," Jake asked, fear tightening in his throat. "I just wanted to express my pain," Tom sobbed, looking weakened. He was frustrated, angry that no one was listening, but they didn't wait to see. The weight of Tom's words hung heavily in the air. Jake realized that this was deeper than a moment of madness. It was a reflection of a world where voices were often silenced in the chaos of misunderstanding. "Tom, you're not alone in this," Jake said softly. "We can figure it out, but you need to trust me." Tom shook his head, unraveling further. "I don't know if I can, Jake." "You haven't," Jake reassured him. "We're your friends. We care about you. Please let me help." Behind them, the officer monitored their conversation closely, wary of tempers flaring. Jake sensed that time was slipping through his fingers, narrowing quickly. The atmosphere thrummed with tension, urgency swirling around them. "Do you see that? The crowd is frightened. They don't understand your message, Tom." Tom looked out past the officer, the fear in his eyes slowly giving way to something deeper in embers of hope. "Then make them," Jake replied vehemently, hand clasping Tom's shoulder. "You've always been a dreamer. Show them your art, your heart." In that moment, a quiet determination sparked between them. Jake felt not only the weight of Tom's despair, but also the shifting currents of possibility. "I can do that," Tom finally said, a flicker of belief igniting behind his eyes. The officer stepped closer, evaluating their exchange. "You have to cooperate, Tom." "Just give me a chance," Tom pleaded, vulnerability evident in his voice. As if the world paused, Jake and Tom shared a look that spoke volumes. They were not just friends, they were allies in a quest for understanding and redemption. With a nod from the officer, Tom began to speak, pouring out his heart as he shared the truth of his pain, the frustration that had driven him to the brink. The crowd outside began to listen, a wave of curiosity washing over them. Jake could feel the atmosphere shift. What started as chaos was transforming into something meaningful, something larger than either of them. With every passionate word, Tom was reclaiming his voice, paintbrush in hand, painting a new reality. Behind them, the sunset carved splashes of color across the sky, echoing the vibrant spirit that had always defined Tom. In that moment, the world felt different, more alive, pulsing with the potential for understanding. And as Tom spoke, Jake knew that while this incident could have ended in darkness, it instead became a turning point, a chance to express hurt and seek healing together. It was a true testament to friendship, courage, and the power of words to change the lives of not just one man, but an entire community. The journey wasn't over, but together they had taken a vital step toward a brighter future, one where healing had a voice and where every story mattered. The rain drummed steadily against the pavement as Jason stood in the bustling hotel lobby, his umbrella dripping beside him. He scanned the colorful crowd, a sea of faces rushing past, each one on a mission. Inside, his heart beat like a drum. He was only in town for a brief meeting, and now he was lost, tension coiling within him. "Excuse me," he finally said, stopping a young man with headphones around his neck. The young man pulled out one earbud, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Yeah, you just head out that door, take a left, and walk straight for a block or two." Jason replied, grateful for the guidance. He turned to make his way toward the exit, but something on the lobby TV caught his eye. He stopped, curiosity pulling him in like a magnet. A serious anchor filled the screen. "We interrupt our program for a shocking report. A man was arrested just moments ago in downtown Chicago after a violent altercation that left several bystanders injured." Jason squinted, fingers brushing the sides of his temples. The image of the man flashed on the screen, dirty blonde hair, a scruffy beard, and haunted eyes. His heart sank. It was Aaron, his childhood friend. Just like that, the room around him spun. "No way," Jason whispered, a chill running down his spine. The anchor continued. "Police have asked the public to remain vigilant." Shocked murmurs swept through the lobby like a ripple. Jason's hands trembled and anxiety gnawed at his insides. This was not the Aaron he remembered, the boy who had once navigated their neighborhood on bicycles, racing toward dreams and adventures. He recoiled from the screen. The memories, the laughter, all flashed before his eyes like a movie reel. What went wrong? How did his vibrant friend turn into someone the world feared? Just then, a woman in a sharp business suit approached him, concern etched across her face. "Are you okay?" Jason swallowed hard, trying to gather himself. "That's my friend." The woman glanced at the TV, her expression shifting from concern to understanding. "If he's in trouble, you need to find a way to reach him." A sense of purpose ignited within Jason. "You're right." Without hesitating, he pushed through the lobby door, the rush of the city striking him like a wave. The rain had lightened, but the streets still glistened, reflecting the chaos he felt inside. Each step felt heavy as the weight of the moment pressed down on him. Why hadn't they stayed in touch? How could he have missed the signs? He fought through the suffocating thoughts, holding on to hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to help Aaron reclaim his life. Jason hurried down a tangled path of busy sidewalks and busy traffic, the city pulsing all around him. Each passing face seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, laughter and anger flashing through. He reached the area where the news report claimed the incident took place, what should have been a familiar neighborhood but now felt alien and foreboding. And there it was, a police barricade, flashing lights, and an anxious crowd murmuring amongst themselves. Panic tinged the air, thick with tension. Jason's stomach churned as he fought the urge to turn and flee, but he couldn't, he wouldn't turn away. "Hey," a police officer barked as Jason approached the barricade, the officer's expression stern and unyielding. "I need to find Aaron," Jason said, desperation giving his voice an edge. "He's my friend." The officer asked, scanning Jason's face for potential trouble. "No, but I know him." Jason's emotions spilled out raw and fierce. "He's not a danger." Another officer nearby exchanged glances with the first. The tension in the air hung like a storm cloud, thick and unyielding. The officer paused, then relented slightly. "Okay, but you stay calm." Jason nodded and felt the adrenaline surge through him as he stepped past the barrier. The world around him faded momentarily as he focused solely on those haunted eyes he'd seen on the screen. As he drew closer, the scene unfolded before him. Aaron sat slumped against the wall, hands secured in cuffs. His appearance mirrored the chaos in his mind-rumpled clothing, wild hair, eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. Jason called, his voice cracking. The moment their eyes met, a flicker of recognition sparked, but anger quickly chased it away. Aaron's voice was hoarse, each word a weighty struggle. "I saw the news," Jason replied, kneeling down to be eye level. "What happened? What do you care? Everyone thinks I'm a monster now." Aaron spat, bitterness dripping from his words. "No, you're not a monster," Jason insisted. "You're my friend." Aaron looked away, shame etched into his features, and Jason felt his own heart break. He remembered when they used to talk about their struggles, the long nights spent in deep conversation. But somewhere along the way, life had pulled them apart, and now the distance felt like an insurmountable chasm. "They'll never believe me," Aaron muttered, voice trembling. "Yes, it does. You're still you, and I'm here," Jason replied, feeling the tension in his chest swell. "You can't give up." Aaron's eyes blazed for a split second, but it flickered just as quickly. "No, you haven't. You just need to find it again," Jason urged, taking a breath as he leaned closer. "Remember that summer by the lake when we believed we could change the world?" The memories washed over Aaron, and for a moment, a softness enveloped him. "It's still there," Jason insisted, locking eyes with his friend. "I believe in you. The world out there is still waiting to hear from you." Around them, the officers hovered, watching the exchange closely, unsure of whether it would ignite further chaos or spark a glimmer of hope. The air felt thick with potential, every moment stretching like a rubber band ready to snap. The officer stepped in closer. "All right, I can give you a few minutes," he said, noticing the genuine emotion between the two friends. "But you need to come to terms with what happened. We have protocols." "I understand," Jason said, still focused on Aaron. Aaron's gaze fell to the ground, the weight of their conversation heavy in his heart. "They will. You just have to show them the truth. Show them who you really are," Jason said, his voice steady. "It's not over yet. We can tell your story." As Aaron looked up, hesitance still lingered in his eyes, but a flicker of determination was beginning to ignite just beneath the surface. In a moment of stillness, Jason took a deep breath, whispering a silent promise. He wasn't going to let his friend suffer alone. They would walk through this darkness together. With a nod from the officer, the conversation shifted into a new realm, one where Aaron began to share the truth. Each word dripped with gravity, revealing a story of struggle, mental health, loneliness, and a loud world that wouldn't listen. As he spoke, Jason could see the crowd outside start to shift, faces transforming from fear to curiosity. They wanted to understand. "Sometimes it felt like I was shouting into a void," Aaron said, his voice shaky but steadying. "I didn't know how to reach anyone." "I get that," Jason replied gently. "You've always been the one lifting everyone else up." The officer's expression softened, and Jason felt that maybe change was possible. They were breaking down walls. Hope flickered in his chest, igniting like the dawn after a long night. With every passing moment, Aaron's voice grew louder, more commanding. "What I did today was wrong, but I never meant to hurt anyone. I was lost. I wanted to be heard." For the first time, Jason saw a glimmer of the old Aaron shining through the darkness. The crowd had gone silent, and when he glanced back, people were genuinely listening. The moment shifted as Aaron pressed forward, sharing the hurts and fears he had kept so locked away. It wasn't just his story anymore, it was a call for understanding, for compassion. And as he spoke, the rain outside stopped, leaving a fresh smell of earth in the air, the sun pushing through the clouds with a golden glow. The tension began to lift like the fog settling from a long storm. Jason felt pride swell within him as he listened to his friend reclaim his narrative. The audience was starting to see not a monster, but a person pushed to the edge, desperately seeking empathy, a plea for understanding that transcended the chaos surrounding him. The officer stepped back, nodding to Jason as he recognized the momentum building. "All right, we'll take it from here. Aaron, we should get you the help you deserve." Aaron looked back toward Jason, gratitude radiating from him. "I didn't think I could face this, but you were right." "You'll always have me," Jason replied, vulnerability washing over him. "We're friends." As Aaron was escorted away, Jason felt a heavy burden lift from his heart, hope blooming in its place. They had taken a stand, lighting a path through the shadows, forming a bridge over turbulent waters. With a deep breath, he turned back to the hotel lobby, feeling the electric energy of possibility. Outside, the world continued to spin, colors brightening, laughter filling the air. Life was chaotic, sometimes dark, yet it was also filled with light, connection, and the promise of new beginnings. As he stepped back into the lobby, Jason knew he would never take a moment for granted again. The rain drummed steadily against the pavement as Jason stood in the bustling hotel lobby, his umbrella dripping beside him. He scanned the colorful crowd, a sea of faces rushing past, each one on a mission. Inside, his heart beat like a drum. He was only in town for a brief meeting, and now he was lost, tension coiling within him. "Excuse me," he finally said, stopping a young man with headphones around his neck. The young man pulled out one earbud, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Yeah, you just head out that door, take a left, and walk straight for a block or two." Jason replied, grateful for the guidance. He turned to make his way toward the exit, but something on the lobby TV caught his eye. He stopped, curiosity pulling him in like a magnet. A serious anchor filled the screen. "We interrupt our program for a shocking report. A man was arrested just moments ago in downtown Chicago after a violent altercation that left several bystanders injured." Jason squinted, fingers brushing the sides of his temples. The image of the man flashed on the screen, dirty blonde hair, a scruffy beard, and haunted eyes. His heart sank. It was Aaron, his childhood friend. Just like that, the room around him spun. "No way," Jason whispered, a chill running down his spine. The anchor continued. "Police have asked the public to remain vigilant." Shocked murmurs swept through the lobby like a ripple. Jason's hands trembled and anxiety gnawed at his insides. This was not the Aaron he remembered, the boy who had once navigated their neighborhood on bicycles, racing toward dreams and adventures. He recoiled from the screen. Memories flashed before his eyes like a movie reel, their endless summer days, laughing over ice cream cones, sharing secrets beneath the stars. How had things come to this? How had his vibrant friend turned into someone the world feared? Just then, a woman in a sharp business suit approached him, concern etched across her face. "Are you okay?" Jason swallowed hard, trying to gather himself. "That's my friend." The woman glanced at the TV, her expression shifting from concern to understanding. "If he's in trouble, you need to find a way to reach him." A sense of purpose ignited within Jason. "You're right." Without hesitating, he pushed through the lobby door, the rush of the city striking him like a wave. The rain had lightened, but the streets still glistened, reflecting the chaos he felt inside. Each step felt heavy as the weight of the moment pressed down on him. Why hadn't they stayed in touch? How could he have missed the signs? He fought through the suffocating thoughts, holding on to hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to help Aaron reclaim his life. Jason hurried down a tangled path of busy sidewalks and busy traffic, the city pulsing all around him. Each passing face seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, laughter and anger flashing through. He reached the area where the news report claimed the incident took place, what should have been a familiar neighborhood but now felt alien and foreboding. And there it was, a police barricade, flashing lights, and an anxious crowd murmuring amongst themselves. Panic tinged the air, thick with tension. Jason's stomach churned as he fought the urge to turn and flee, but he couldn't, he wouldn't turn away. "Hey," a police officer barked as Jason approached the barricade, the officer's expression stern and unyielding. "I need to find Aaron," Jason said, desperation giving his voice an edge. "He's my friend," the officer asked, scanning Jason's face for potential trouble. "No, but I know him." Jason's emotions spilled out, raw and fierce. "He's not a danger." Another officer nearby exchanged glances with the first. The tension in the air hung like a storm cloud, thick and unyielding. The officer paused, then relented slightly. "Okay, but you stay calm." Jason nodded and felt the adrenaline surge through him as he stepped past the barrier. The world around him faded momentarily as he focused solely on those haunted eyes he'd seen on the screen. As he drew closer, the scene unfolded before him. Aaron sat slumped against the wall, hands secured in cuffs. His appearance mirrored the chaos in his mind-rumpled clothing, wild hair, eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. Jason called, his voice cracking. The moment their eyes met, a flicker of recognition sparked, but anger quickly chased it away. Aaron's voice was hoarse, each word a weighty struggle. "I saw the news," Jason replied, kneeling down to be eye level. "What happened? What do you care? Everyone thinks I'm a monster now," Aaron spat, bitterness dripping from his words. "No, you're not a monster," Jason insisted. "You're my friend." Aaron looked away, shame etched into his features, and Jason felt his own heart break. He remembered when they used to talk about their struggles, the long nights spent in deep conversation. But somewhere along the way, life had pulled them apart, and now the distance felt like an insurmountable chasm. "They'll never believe me," Aaron muttered, voice trembling. "Yes, it does, you're still you, and I'm here," Jason replied, feeling the tension in his chest swell. "You can't give up." Aaron's eyes blazed for a split second, but it flickered just as quickly. "No, you haven't, you just need to find it again," Jason urged, taking a breath as he leaned closer. "Remember that summer by the lake when we believed we could change the world?" The memories washed over Aaron, and for a moment a softness enveloped him. "It's still there," Jason insisted, locking eyes with his friend. "I believe in you. The world out there is still waiting to hear from you." Around them, the officers hovered, watching the exchange closely, unsure of whether it would ignite further chaos or spark a glimmer of hope. The air felt thick with potential, every moment stretching like a rubber band ready to snap. The officer stepped in closer, evaluating their exchange. "All right, I can give you a few minutes," he said, noticing the genuine emotion between the two friends. "But you need to come to terms with what happened. We have protocols." "I understand," Jason said, still focused on Aaron. Aaron's gaze fell to the ground, the weight of their conversation heavy in his heart. "They will. You just have to show them the truth. Show them who you really are," Jason said, his voice steady. "It's not over yet. We can tell your story." As Aaron looked up, hesitance still lingered in his eyes, but a flicker of determination was beginning to ignite just beneath the surface. In a moment of stillness, Jason took a deep breath, whispering a silent promise. He wasn't going to let his friends suffer alone. They would walk through this darkness together. With a nod from the officer, the conversation shifted into a new realm, one where Aaron began to share the truth. Each word dripped with gravity, revealing a story of struggle, mental health, loneliness, and a loud world that wouldn't listen. As he spoke, Jason could see the crowd outside start to shift, faces transforming from fear to curiosity. They wanted to understand. "Sometimes it felt like I was shouting into a void," Aaron said, his voice shaky but steadying. "I didn't know how to reach anyone." "I get that," Jason replied gently. "You've always been the one lifting everyone else up." The officer's expression softened, and Jason felt that maybe change was possible. They were breaking down walls. Hope flickered in his chest, igniting like the dawn after a long night. With every passing moment, Aaron's voice grew louder, more commanding. "What I did today was wrong, but I never meant to hurt anyone. I was lost. I wanted to be heard." For the first time, Jason saw a glimmer of the old Aaron shining through the darkness. The crowd had gone silent, and when he glanced back, people were genuinely listening. The moment shifted as Aaron pressed forward, sharing the hurts and fears he had kept so locked away. It wasn't just his story anymore, it was a call for understanding, for compassion. And as he spoke, the rain outside stopped, leaving a fresh smell of earth in the air, the sun pushing through the clouds with a golden glow. The tension began to lift like the fog settling from a long storm. Jason felt pride swell within him as he listened to his friend reclaim his narrative. The audience was starting to see not a monster, but a person pushed to the edge, desperately seeking empathy, a plea for understanding that transcended the chaos surrounding him. The officer stepped back, nodding to Jason as he recognized the momentum building. "All right, we'll take it from here. Aaron, we should get you the help you deserve." Aaron looked back toward Jason, gratitude radiating from him. "I didn't think I could face this, but you were right." "You'll always have me," Jason replied, vulnerability washing over him. "We're friends." As Aaron was escorted away, Jason felt a heavy burden lift from his heart, hope blooming in its place. They had taken a stand, lighting a path through the shadows, forming a bridge over turbulent waters. With a deep breath, he turned back to the hotel lobby, feeling the electric energy of possibility. Outside, the world continued to spin, colors brightening, laughter filling the air. Life was chaotic, sometimes dark, yet it was also filled with light, connection, and the promise of new beginnings. As he stepped back into the lobby, Jason knew he would never take a moment for granted again. Somewhere in the depths of despair, friendship had forged a new course, one filled with understanding, vulnerability, and hope. The rain dripped steadily from the edges of the awning, pooling on the sidewalk, where a man stood nervously tapping his foot. Mark had just flown into New York, and he felt unmoored amidst the bright lights and relentless hustle of the city. He was on a simple quest to find his brother's apartment, a task that seemed easy enough on the map he'd stashed in his pocket. But now here he was lost. He called out, reaching out to a young woman briskly walking by with a coffee cup in hand. She paused, glancing back, her dark hair whipping in the wind. "Can you help me?" "Just head down this street, take a right at the park, and it'll be a few blocks down," she said, glancing at her watch and then disappearing into the crowd. Mark shouted after her, but he felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He took a deep breath and turned to find the way. As he headed toward the street, he caught sight of a television hanging in the lobby of a nearby hotel, the bright screen flickering with urgency. The host's voice cut through the ambient noise, sharp as a knife. Mark instinctively moved closer, drawn in by the unexpected energy. The anchor continued, "We're following a developing story. A man has barricaded himself in a subway station, causing widespread panic." Mark's heart hitched. An image flashed on the screen. Disheveled and wild-eyed, the man looked familiar. The moment felt surreal. He squinted harder, recognizing not just the face, but the crumpled jacket and the distinctive tattoo. It was his childhood friend, Leo. "No, no, no," Mark murmured under his breath, the world around him narrowing into a tunnel. The anchor's voice faded away as his thoughts raced. Hadn't they just reconnected last month? Why was Leo doing something like this? Mark felt a rush of memories, long nights discussing dreams, vibrant days of shared laughter. Leo always had a wild spark about him, but violence, this was a different story. He stepped back, all mingling with horror as the tension in the lobby thickened. For the bystanders, the chaos unfolded like a train wreck, utterly shocking, yet impossible to look away from. Mark's mind was spinning. What had happened to Leo since they'd last talked? What had changed? A voice pierced through his swirling thoughts. It was Sarah, his old friend from high school, eyes wide with concern as she approached. He asked breathlessly, pointing toward the screen. Sarah followed his gaze. "Yeah, it's crazy." "Yeah," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know he struggled," she said, her tone shifting to a blend of sympathy and unease. But Mark felt a mix of dread and disbelief. "You didn't hear, the last few years have been rough for him. He lost his job and spiraled down a really dark path," Sarah replied, pain evident in her voice. She trailed off. Mark shot back, frustration mingled with guilt. He should have been there for Leo, should have checked in more often, made more effort to stay connected. "I didn't know how deep it ran," Sarah said, her eyes softening. Mark felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He knew Leo longed to be understood, wanted to feel seen in a world that often felt indifferent. But now here he was, cornered like an animal, and the weight of another person's pain pressed down on his shoulders. "We have to help him." Barricaded, he might be scared, not violent, Mark insisted, determination igniting within him. Sarah hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "We have to find a way to talk to him," Mark said, glancing back at the TV, where the footage shifted to chaotic scenes, police cars parked at odd angles, officers huddling in groups. "Maybe if he sees a familiar face, he'll listen." "I don't know if that's wise," Sarah cautioned, worry knitting her brows together. "Then I'll handle it," Mark said. "He trusts me." Mark stepped back outside. The rain had stopped, but the rush of the city felt deafening. He had to find Leo before things spiraled further. With each step, memories flooded back, the long talks, the laughter, and the dreams that once felt limitless. He hurried down the street, weaving through throngs of busy people, the energy of the city buzzing all around him. As he approached the subway station, the crowd thickened, anxious whispers filling the air. He could see police officers standing guard, their expressions serious, faces set. A sense of urgency seeped into his bones, but he pressed on. Time was running out. "Hey, you can't go any further," an officer called out as Mark approached the barrier. "I need to speak with Leo," Mark replied, desperation slicing through his words. "I'm his friend." The officer eyed him skeptically, glancing at the commotion around them. "This is a serious situation." Mark took a step closer, his heart racing. "I know him, please just let me try, he's scared." The officer hesitated, weighing his options. It was probably against every protocol in the book, but the earnest desperation in Mark's eyes softened something in him. "All right," he said finally. "You have 5 minutes, but if things go sideways, you get out." "Understood," Mark nodded, adrenaline surging through him as he ducked under the police tape. The weight of the moment pressed upon him. He had to get through to Leo. Walking toward the station, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. The sounds of chaotic rustling echoed off the walls as Mark shouted, "Leo." Silence hung in the air, thick and tense. For a moment he thought he might not get a response, but then a voice broke through. "Mark." Leo sounded disoriented, like he was still trying to process everything happening around him. Mark called, stepping closer to the edge of the barricade. "I'm here." There was a pause, then Leo emerged from the shadows, eyes wild, breath coming in quick bursts. "What are you doing here?" "No, I'm not leaving you," Mark said, his heart racing. "I saw what was on the news. Leo, you need help." The look on Leo's face shifted, a mix of anger and confusion flickering behind his eyes. "Nobody cares." Mark stepped back instinctively but held his ground. "You don't have to scream to be heard. I'm here now," Leo shouted, voice breaking. Mark felt the tears prickling in his eyes, the weight of reality crashing down on him. "I know you feel lost, but this isn't you. You were always the one who fought for what mattered, the one who stood up for everyone who felt invisible." For a moment, there was silence. The tension hung heavy and Mark's heart raced as he watched Leo grapple with his emotions. "Maybe I'm not that person anymore," Leo said finally, his voice cracking. "No, you haven't. You can find your way back," Mark said, desperation fueling his words. "I believe in you, Leo. Remember when we used to dream about our futures?" As Leo stood before him, staring into the void of his confusion, Mark saw the flicker of recognition, the faint echo of the boy he once knew. Was there still a chance to save him? "Please, Leo, let me help you. We can figure this out together," Mark urged. A moment passed, filled with raw emotion and unspoken fears, and slowly Leo's eyes softened, hinting at a vulnerability that had long been buried beneath layers of despair. He began, his voice trembling. "You don't have to face it on your own," Mark replied firmly. "You have friends who love you, who care deeply." "Yeah," Leo whispered, taking a small step forward. "It's never too late," Mark insisted. "This moment can be the turning point." Leo's defiance started to fade, replaced by the flicker of hope Mark had been searching for. "I just wanted to be heard," he admitted, the words laced with pain. "I'm here," Mark said softly. "You are heard. You always have been." In that moment, understanding washed over Leo's face. The weight of the darkness seemed to lift, even if just a fraction, as he took a deep breath. "Okay," he said finally, voice shaky but resolute. "Let's get out of this mess." With a nod from the officer, Leo stepped away from the brink. The crowd outside buzzed with nervous energy, the air crackling with anticipation. As Mark moved toward him, a wave of relief flooded through them both. The world outside was still moving, cars honking, people rushing, but in that moment it felt like they had fought back against overwhelming odds. "Thank you," Leo whispered as they walked together, newfound purpose coursing through them. "You can and you will," Mark replied. As they emerged from the chaos, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the streets with a warm glow. What began as a moment of panic transformed into a renewed bond between two friends. This was not just the end of a crisis, it was a beginning. And in that bright moment, Mark felt a heavy burden lift, replaced by the promise of healing and the power of friendship. He had faced down the storm not just for Leo, but for both of them. Together, they would rise again, ready to reclaim their place in the world, their voices finally heard. A man stood in the bustling hotel lobby, rain dripping off his umbrella and pooling on the floor. Sam was in town for a conference, but the city felt foreign and chaotic. He glanced at his phone and frowned. The directions to his meeting were a confusing maze on the tiny screen. He just needed a little help. He called out to a woman rushing by, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She paused long enough to take a breath. Sam asked, hopeful, "Sure." "Just go out that door, take a left, and walk 3 blocks," she replied, glancing at her watch. Without another word, she hurried off, leaving him feeling a bit lost amidst the crowd. With a sigh, Sam moved toward the exit, but something caught his eye. A large television mounted in the corner of the lobby blared with news, the words "breaking news" flashing ominously across the screen. He hesitated, his curiosity piqued. The newscaster's voice resonated through the room. "We interrupt this broadcast with breaking news. A man has been arrested in connection with a violent incident that occurred downtown." Sam's heart dropped, a punch to the gut. He leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. The image shifted, showing a disheveled man being led away in handcuffs, wild eyes darting about. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The man had unkempt hair and a distant look he couldn't be. Sam blurted, disbelief washing over him. This was no stranger, but his old college roommate. Memories flooded his mind of late-night study sessions, their inside jokes, and the laughter they shared over ramen noodles. It felt unreal. The anchor continued reporting on the scene, declaring that police believed the man had a history of erratic behavior. Panic surged through Sam as he recalled instances he had brushed off. Was this the man he had known, the caring, creative Jake who once painted murals in their campus courtyard? He stepped back from the screen, overwhelmed by guilt and confusion. How had Jake gotten to this point? Sam paused, wrestling with anxiety, weighing the possibilities. He had lost touch over the years, but what if he could help? A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Claire, an old friend who had shared many nights studying with him. She moved closer, her face a mix of concern and disbelief. "It can't be," he muttered, shaking his head. "I just saw him a few months ago. He was fine." Claire crossed her arms, her brow furrowing. "You know, he never really bounced back after he lost his job. It's been rough for him, Sam." Sam protested. "This isn't like him." "That's not how it looks to the police or the media," Claire replied, her voice softening. "But you know him." In that moment, determination surged through Sam. "I have to do something," he declared. He couldn't just stand there and let the world frame Jake in a way that contradicted everything he knew about him. "I don't think you should go," Claire began, but Sam was already moving toward the exit. She called. "To the subway station," Sam replied, urgency propelling him forward. As he stepped back into the city rain, droplets rolled down his face, mirroring the confusion or perhaps the trepidation in his heart. Each step felt heavy, filled with memories of laughter and dreams that had felt so vibrant back then. He navigated through the maze of streets, his mind racing. He could almost see Jake in their college apartment, passionately discussing his latest art project, his eyes alight with possibility. How had it come to this? Arriving at the subway station, Sam saw police barricades and a small crowd that had gathered, concern faintly etched on their faces. Approached, he could hear whispers, speculation thick in the air. His heart raced. With a deep breath, he steeled himself and stepped closer. He called out to a police officer standing near the entrance. The officer turned, eyebrows raised, assessing Sam's determination. The officer asked, his expression serious. "I need to find my friend," Sam replied quickly. "His name is Jake, he's the one they're talking about." The officer studied him for a moment, the tension palpable. "You need to back off, kid. This is a crime scene, I understand, but please just give me a chance. He trusts me. I can talk to him," Sam implored, desperation creeping into his voice. After a pause, the officer relented slightly, nodding in a way that said he wasn't entirely convinced but felt the weight of the plea. "Fine, you've got 2 minutes. Yes." Sam breathed, urgency filling his every cell as he slipped past the barrier to where chaos lingered. Inside the subway station, silence hung heavy. Sam scanned the area, and in the corner he saw Jake slumped against a wall, eyes wild and unfocused. His clothes were rumpled, and the frantic look in his eyes sent a bolt of fear through Sam. Sam called as he approached, heart pounding. Jake looked up, the light flickering in his gaze. He gasped, his voice trembling. "I know what's happening." "I saw the news," Sam replied, trying to catch Jake's gaze, hoping to anchor him. Jake cried out, hands shaking as he pushed against the wall. Sam urged, desperation lacing his words, "You don't have to go through this alone." Jake's eyes darted around, fear swirling within him like a tempest. "I've lost control. Let me talk to them. You're still in there, Jake," Sam said, feeling the urgency of every word. "You've helped so many people." For a moment, a flicker of clarity appeared in Jake's chaotic gaze. The shadows began to lift, if only slightly. Sam stepped closer, keeping his voice low and soothing. "I believe in you, Jake. You've always fought for yourself and for others. You don't have to prove anything to the world, just be you," he urged, hoping to light a spark. Tears welled up in Jake's eyes as he shuddered slightly. "You don't understand. I get it. I can't pretend to know everything you've been through, but I know you're still here. Fought hard to stay afloat," Sam spoke gently. "You can face this together with me." An echo of their college years brushed against Sam's heart, late-night talks, unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hope flaring in uncertain times. There had to be a way back to that spirit, the one that had filled Jake with creativity and dreams. The shadows in Jake's eyes flickered, uncertainty wrestling with the fear. "Then we'll face that too," Sam replied firmly. "But you don't have to stand alone. Today isn't the end." A moment passed, tension vibrating in the air like a taut string. Then Jake nodded ever so slightly, and with newfound resolve began to rise. Sam could see it, a flicker of the Jake he once knew, the artist with heart and passion. "All right," Jake said, voice steadying. As they both turned back toward the police control area, the moment unfurled with clarity and purpose. Suddenly it felt as though a door had opened, releasing the breaking storm inside. Sam called, drawing the attention of the police nearby. "We're going to allow him to talk." The officers exchanged appraising glances, uncertainty shifting between them, but Sam stood firm, his heart pounding in his chest. The world outside was still moving, lives unfolding and evolving, even in times of chaos. "You've got to clear the area," one officer said, but there was a newfound respect in his eyes. He could see the determination in Sam's stance, the connection guiding Jake back toward the light. As the officers stepped back to create some space, Jake looked up at Sam, gratitude pouring from his weary gaze. "I didn't think I could face them, but you were right." "You'll always have me," Sam replied firmly, and then his voice softened. "This isn't just about today." With every heartbeat, they stepped closer to shedding the darkness, reclaiming the vibrancy that defined their friendship. As they exited the chaotic scene, the tension finally broke apart, revealing what had been buried beneath a raw and powerful bond, capable of thriving even in the hardest moments. In the sunlight that broke through the dark clouds, Sam felt hope bloom within him. Together, they could have the hard conversations, navigate through the tangled mess, and carve a roadmap toward recovery. It wouldn't be easy, but they were both ready to face it, a willingness to fight for each other as friends do. With Jake's hand on his shoulder, Sam knew they had taken the first essential step. The storm may have passed, but a new chapter awaited, one filled with promise, healing, and the unwavering belief that together they could overcome anything. He stepped into the bright lobby of the downtown hotel, shaking off the last drops of rain from his coat. Mark was in a hurry. He had just flown in for a job interview and was already feeling the pressure. All he needed were directions to the nearest subway station to get him to the corporate meeting on time. "Excuse me," he said to a young woman standing by the concierge desk. She looked up, momentarily taken aback by his urgency. "Just head out the door, take a right, and walk 2 blocks," he replied, relief flooding through him. He was about to leave when something on the large screen TV in the corner caught his eye. "Breaking news," the announcer intoned, their tone serious. Intrigued, Mark stepped closer to get a better view. The screen flickered to life, showing chaotic scenes of a street filled with shouting people and flashing police lights. "We interrupt our program for a developing situation. A man has reportedly taken hostages at the downtown subway station." In that moment, Mark's heart raced as the camera switched to an image of the man in question. It was someone he recognized, Jake, his old college roommate. "No way," Mark whispered, feeling the blood drain from his face. This couldn't be happening. Just last month, they had shared beers and screamed along to their favorite songs. How had it come to this? The news report continued, detailing how police had surrounded the area and were currently trying to negotiate with Jake. Authorities are urging anyone in the vicinity to stay away as they assess the situation, the anchor added, the urgency rippling through the crowd gathered in the lobby. Mark's mind was swirling. Jake had always been passionate, but this was beyond anything he would have imagined. What had happened in just a few short weeks? Memories flashed in his mind, the laughter, the late-night study sessions, the dreams they had shared about their futures. Panic gripped him. He couldn't just stand idly by while his friend was in such dire straits, presented as some kind of criminal. He had to act, but how? A voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to see Clara, an old friend from college, approaching him. Her face was pale with concern. "Yeah," he replied, his voice shaky. "That's Jake, I can't." Clara's eyes fell to the floor, and Mark could see the regret etched on her face. It's been rough for him. He lost his job, and I think he's been struggling ever since. Mark asked, frustration creeping into his voice. They had all known he had challenges, but nobody had thought it spiraled this far. Clara shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. He just kept pushing people away. "I thought maybe he would reach out for help when he needed it, but he didn't." Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach. How could they have let this happen? The guilt washed over him like a wave. They had all been so busy with their lives, and now it felt like every moment lost had led them to this. "No, we can't just leave him like this," he insisted, determination rising within him. "I need to try to help him." Clara hesitated. "Mark, that place is dangerous." "I have to try," he said, stepping toward the exit. "He's my friend." Before Clara could respond, he found himself outside, the chilly air washing over him. He was flooded with anger, not toward Jake, but at the world. They had all drifted apart, letting their lives spin out of control. But could he really reach Jake when everything was so chaotic? Mark moved quickly through the busy streets, purpose driving him forward. With every step, he recalled their friendship, how they had shared ideas late into the night, believing they could change the world with their art and ambition. Somewhere along the way, they had all lost that spark, some more than others. As he reached the subway station, he saw police lights flashing, the sound of sirens filling the air. The crowd was gathering, a sea of anxious faces and murmurs. Fear and curiosity hung heavy, and Mark's heart raced. Would he be able to get through to reach Jake before it was too late? He approached a police officer stationed at the entrance. "I need to speak to Jake," he demanded, urgency spilling from him. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Mark insisted, desperation turning his voice steady. "Please, we can calm him down. He's not dangerous." The officer hesitated, searching Mark's face for sincerity. "This is a serious situation. We need to keep it secure." "We can't risk escalating anything here," he said, but the determination in Mark's eyes began to soften his stance. "I understand," Mark replied, swirling emotions rising, "but if you don't let me try, you're going to lose him." After a long pause, the officer finally relented, nodding slowly. "You have 3 minutes." Mark felt a surge of gratitude as he slipped past the barricade, pushing through the crowd. The air felt charged with tension, and he spotted the flicker of police lights illuminating the once familiar area. He shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's me, Mark." He could barely see through the throng of officers, but then he spotted Jake, sitting on the cold ground, his knees pulled to his chest, eyes frantic, wild like a caged animal. Mark moved closer, heart pounding in his chest. "Jake, it's Mark." Jake looked up, confusion washing over his features. "Why are you here?" His voice was sharp, filled with panic. "I came because I care about you. You're not alone in this," Mark shouted, fighting the urge to retreat. He watched as Jake's hands trembled, fear flickering in his eyes. "You don't understand," Jake cried, tears brimming as he looked around himself, realizing just how trapped he felt. "Then let me help you explain," Mark pressed on, seeing the storm swirling in Jake's gaze. "You used to fight for what you believed in." Jake cried, voice cracking. Mark stepped closer, keeping his tone calm. "Then let us help you. The police are here to listen." For a moment, Jake hesitated, weighing his options amidst the chaos. He asked, fear lacing his words. "They will if you let them. You only have to reach out," Mark replied fiercely, holding Jake's gaze. "You're still the same person underneath this mess." Time seemed to stretch as Jake wrestled with his thoughts. Sam could see the flicker of recognition, the spark of the old Jake fighting to be seen. Mark reached out his hand, determined to bridge the gap, to ground his friend in the reality they once shared. "It's not too late, Jake. We can do this together." Silence enveloped them, the chaos of the world fading away for a moment. Slowly, Jake began to nod, like a dam that had finally burst after holding back too much. "Okay," he whispered, taking a shaky breath. With the officer nearby still watching, Mark took a step back, relieved but still cautious. "Let's go back together." "You're going to be okay." As they walked toward the cluster of officers, Mark felt hope swell in his chest. Maybe they hadn't lost Jake entirely. Maybe they could bring him back piece by piece. "Please just give him a chance," Mark pleaded with the officers as they approached, their expressions wary but softening slightly. "He just needs to communicate." The officer nodded, and Mark glanced back at Jake, who still seemed overwhelmed, but there was a new determination blossoming behind his tired eyes. "I'm here to listen," one officer said firmly, extending his hand as he stepped closer. "Why don't we talk about what's happening?" Jake took a deep breath, and for the first time he seemed to rise back into himself. I don't want to hurt anyone," he stammered, anxiety still clear in his voice. "You are being heard, Jake," Mark replied, sensing that the moment was shifting. "You're taking the first step back to who you really are." As they all stood in that charged space, Sam realized this wasn't just about Jake's crisis. It was about reclaiming the person he had once been, about hope arising from despair. Jake began to share his story, the words tumbling out like confetti after a celebration. He spoke of his struggles with finding work, how he felt invisible as the world moved on without him. He spoke of loneliness and how he felt more like a shadow than a person. Each word flowed like a healing balm, and with every declaration, it was as if a weight lifted. The officers listened carefully, empathy playing on their faces. "I didn't mean to scare anyone, I just wanted to express my pain," Jake admitted, finally opening up like a flower in bloom. Mark stood to the side, pride swelling in his chest. This was the Jake he knew, the passionate, earnest person who had always fought fiercely for what mattered. As they talked, the chaos of the station began to shrink, the air becoming lighter. The police began to step back slightly, cautiously optimistic. Maybe they could turn this turbulent encounter into something meaningful. "Thank you for listening," Jake finally said, his voice finally steady, dripping with sincerity. With that, a moment of understanding sparked, bridging the gap between his past and his present. With a final nod from the officer, they began to navigate a plan. Sam felt exhilarated. What started as a crisis had transformed into a lifeline, a testament to the power of human connection. As Jake was led toward a waiting squad car, Sam felt a rush of emotion. They had faced the storm together, rising above despair, reconnecting in a time of need. "Thank you for being there," Jake said quietly, a hint of gratitude in his voice. "Always," Mark replied, feeling a warmth in his heart. As the sun began to peek through the clouds, illuminating the world with a renewed glow, Sam knew they had taken the first step toward healing, one filled with hope, understanding, and the promise of brighter days ahead. He stepped into the bustling hotel lobby, shaking off raindrops from his coat. Mark was in town for a job interview that could change everything, and the city felt vibrant, alive. Yet beneath the excitement lay a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He just arrived, and now he was lost in this chaotic expanse of unfamiliar streets. "Excuse me," he called out, stopping a young woman who hurried past with a coffee in hand. "Can you help me?" She glanced back, her eyes narrowing as she processed his desperation. "Just head out that door," she pointed at the entrance. "Take a left and walk 2 blocks. Mark replied, beaming with gratitude. He turned to leave, but something on the overhead TV caught his eye. Breaking news, the anchor's voice sliced through the ambient chatter and bustling foot traffic. Mark felt a chill creeping down his spine. He stepped closer, fixated on the screen. The image flickered, revealing a chaotic scene, flashing police lights, a crowd gathered near a subway station, and an officer barking orders. Mark's heart sank as he caught a glimpse of a familiar face among the chaos. It was Jake, his college roommate. "No, no, no," Mark whispered to himself as he moved closer to see better. The anchor continued. "An individual has taken several hostages during a standoff at city's downtown subway station. Eyewitnesses report he is behaving erratically." Panic surged through Mark. How could this be happening? Jake had always been passionate, a free spirit who believed he could change the world with his art. This was completely out of character. He took a step back, grappling with disbelief. Memories flooded his mind, the countless nights spent talking about dreams, their late-night study sessions, and the laughter that echoed through their cramped college apartment. A voice broke through his turmoil. It was Clara, a friend from college who had been passing through the lobby. Her expression mirrored his own alarm. "Yeah," Mark replied, the weight of it all pressing down on his chest. "I can't believe this." "I heard he lost his job a few months ago," Clara said, her brow furrowing. Mark's voice rose, frustration boiling over. "I would have reached out. I thought he'd handle it," Clara replied, guilt creeping into her tone. "But he pulled away from everyone." Mark felt anger and sadness battling within him. How could they have let him slip away? Guilt washed over him like a cold wave. Watching the confusion unfold on-screen felt unbearable. Jake was not a threat, he was a person in pain. "I have to do something," Mark declared, urgency gripping him. Clara protested, her voice tinged with alarm. "You don't know what he's going through." "I know him," Mark insisted. "I can talk to him." Before Clara could object further, Mark pushed toward the exit, determination burning bright. The rain had lightened, but the streets were still slick and foreboding. He had to find Jake before things escalated. Navigating the busy streets felt like running a gauntlet, each passerby's face blurred in a haze of urgency. Images of Jake flooded his mind, their time together echoing through his thoughts. The artist who had painted murals full of life, who had stood up for strangers. That version of Jake felt so distant now. When Mark reached the subway station, he was met with a scene that seemed torn from a movie. Paramedics, police officers, and onlookers, the air thick with tension. Mark's heart raced as he fought his way through the crowd, his senses on high alert. "Hey," an officer shouted as Mark approached the barricade. Mark called back, desperation edging his voice. "He's in there," the officer asked, eyes narrowing. "I don't care," Mark yelled, conviction shaking through him. "He won't listen to anyone else." The officer hesitated, glancing at the chaotic scene just beyond the line of barricades. "Fine, but you need to be careful." Thank you, Mark breathed, gratitude flooding his system as he ducked under the police tape and stepped into the fray. The atmosphere heavy, he called out, "Jake, it's me, Mark." His voice rang through the station, filled with urgency. From behind a group of officers, he spotted Jake sitting on the floor, seemingly lost in a chaotic storm of thoughts. His clothes were rumpled and his hair was disheveled, but it was his eyes that told the story wide, wild and searching for something. Mark shouted, pushing his way closer, heart pounding with each step. "I'm here." Jake looked up, panic flickering across his features. "What are you doing here, Mark?" Mark replied, hands raised slightly to show he meant no threat. "I'm done." Jake's voice cracked, despair pouring out as he brushed a hand through his hair, tugging at it in frustration. "They will," Mark urged, holding Jake's gaze as best he could amidst the chaos. "You're not alone in this." Jake continued, tears spilling over as he struggled to control his emotions. Mark stepped closer, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Then let me help you explain. Let me talk to them. I know you can get through this. Remember how you used to paint? You have so much to say." "Mark, I'm scared," Jake admitted. "I don't know if I'll come back from this." Mark insisted, refusing to waver. "We all go through difficult times, but that doesn't define us." For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Mark could see the flicker of recognition in Jake's eyes, the artist and the friend they once knew battling to break free from the turmoil. "Please," Mark pleaded. "I believe in you. You've always fought for what you care about." Silence enveloped them as the police held their breath, tension thick in the air. Then slowly, Jake took a deep breath and the storm began to quiet just a bit. "Okay," he said softly, his resolve returning. "I promise," Mark replied, bursting with relief. As they stood together, the officers began to adjust their stance, leaning in to better hear what was unfolding. Mark felt a shift in the energy, an opening that hadn't existed just moments before. Mark encouraged Jake, who nodded, seeming to find some of that old bravado he had once possessed. Jake shouted, the words powerful, echoing through the enclosed space. "I'm not a threat." An officer stepped forward, hands open in a gesture of peace. "We're listening, Jake." Mark could see the tension in Jake ease slightly, hope blooming where there had been fear. "I didn't want it to end like this. I never wanted to hurt anyone," Jake said, the emotion rich in his voice. "I know," Mark said, feeling a rush of pride in his friend. In the midst of chaos, a quiet conversation began to blossom, a tentative dance between Jake and the officers, woven with the thread of understanding. As they spoke, the crowd outside began to shift, anxiety giving way to empathy. What could have been a violent confrontation was instead a moment of connection, a reminder that even in darkness, a path could be illuminated. Time seemed to fly as the negotiation unfolded, each word bringing them closer to a sense of resolution. Mark felt excitement course through him. They were fighting back against the narrative that had tried to define them. "I won't give up," Jake said, voices intertwining in shared determination. "I'm here for you," Mark echoed, feeling the bonds of friendship rekindle amidst the turmoil. They had come together in the face of adversity, and it felt powerful. Eventually, the officers began to guide Jake gently towards the exit, still keeping a watchful eye. Mark trailed close behind, his heart soaring with pride and gratitude. They were taking steps toward healing and understanding together. As they emerged from the station and into the cool, fresh air, the sun broke through the clouds like a long-awaited embrace, illuminating the world around them. Mark glanced at Jake, who looked like a weight had been lifted. "Thank you for believing in me," Jake said, voice breaking but full of relief. "You'll always have me," Mark replied, his heart swelling. "We're in this together." With each small step they took away from the chaos, Mark knew they had turned a corner. What had begun as an intense moment of crisis had transformed into a lifeline, a testament to the power of reaching out for help, of being truly seen. They still had a long road ahead, full of challenges and uncertainties, but as the sun dipped lower in the sky, both men felt renewed hope wash over them, the promise of brighter days ahead lingering in the air. This wasn't just a story of despair, it was a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments there could be light. All it took was a little courage, a willingness to reach out, and a friend who believed. In this journey of life, they realized that no one has to walk alone. The road might be uncertain, but with the support of those who care, any storm could be weathered. He stepped into the brightly lit hotel lobby, the air buzzing with energy as guests mingled, laughter echoing off the marble walls. It was a Wednesday afternoon in downtown Chicago, and Lucas was already feeling overwhelmed. He was here for a conference, but the city was much larger and more intimidating than he had anticipated. He fumbled with the crumpled map in his hands, trying to locate the conference center while the steady hum of voices enveloped him. He called out to a couple rushing by, their heads buried in their phones. They barely glanced at him, lost in their own world. Frustration bubbled inside him. Just as he was about to give up, an older gentleman sitting in the lounge chair looked up and smiled gently. Lucas took a breath, grateful for the interruption. "I'm trying to find the conference center on 5th Street. "Of course, just go out that door, take a left, and walk straight for 2 blocks, the man replied. Lucas said, relief flooding through him. He turned to head toward the exit, but something on a television hanging in the corner caught his eye. The sharp red letters spelling breaking news flickered across the screen, and he paused, curiosity pulling him in. The news anchor's voice cut through the lobby buzz. "We interrupt this report to bring you urgent news. A man is in custody following a violent incident at a nearby subway station." Lucas moved closer to the screen, his heart racing. The image of the man flashed, and with a gut-wrenching twist, Lucas recognized him. It was his childhood friend, Adam. No. "No way," Lucas muttered, ripping his gaze away from the screen. It couldn't be true. He hadn't seen Adam in years, but how could someone he knew be in such a dire situation? The anchor continued, detailing how the police had responded to reports of chaos at the subway, how they suspected Adam had lost control during a mental health crisis. "Authorities are urging the public to remain calm," the anchor said, but Lucas felt anything but calm. Panic set in. Adam had always been passionate, full of dreams and ideas, but he also had a history of struggling with his mental health. Everything in Lucas's mind began to race. They had been inseparable in high school, sharing dreams about the future, supporting each other through thick and thin. Now here was Adam, seemingly spiraling into darkness. How had it come to this? A voice broke through his thoughts. It was Sarah, a friend from college, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Yeah," he said, barely able to mask the fear in his voice. "That's Adam. I heard he had been struggling since college," Sarah replied, her tone reflecting a mix of sadness and regret. "But I didn't think." Lucas felt a wave of frustration crashing over him. "We all knew he had issues. Why didn't anyone reach out?" "I just thought he was taking time for himself," Sarah said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The weight of guilt crashed down on Lucas. They had both gone down their separate paths, distracted by work and adulthood, but now it felt like lifetimes had slipped away from him. Adam was in trouble, and Lucas had to do something. He couldn't just stand there while his friend hung in the balance, another life on the line. "I have to go," he declared, determination flooding his voice. Sarah grasped his arm, a note of panic creeping into her voice. "You don't know what's happening over there. Dangerous or not, I can't just stand here and do nothing," he insisted, making a beeline for the door. "I'll talk to him." "Be careful," she called, but Lucas was already outside, stepping into the bustling city streets, the cool air slapping against his cheeks. The world felt like it was spinning, chaos lurking around every corner. Each step was filled with memories, laughs shared, secrets whispered. Adam had walked with him through darkness before. It was time for Lucas to return the favor. As he approached the subway station, police lights flashed in the distance. The scene was chaotic, an array of uniforms, cameras, and concerned onlookers. Lucas's heart raced with anxiety. This was no longer the urban adventure he had envisioned. This was real, raw, and terrifying. "Excuse me," he yelled, pushing through the crowd, but officers blocked his path. One of the officers commanded, his voice steady and authoritative. "You can't pass. I need to speak to Adam," Lucas pleaded, desperation coating his words. "Please, you don't understand." The officer replied, skeptical. "This isn't a simple misunderstanding." Lucas's chest tightened at the implication. "I know him, he's not a threat." The officer hesitated for a moment, assessing Lucas's frantic expression. "You have to be careful. Just give me a chance," Lucas insisted, a shot of hope igniting within him. "I have to try." Against his better judgment, the officer waved him through. "You have 5 minutes. If it gets out of control, you're out." Lucas exclaimed, pushing forward as adrenaline surged through him. As he stepped closer to the scene, the chaos intensified. Officers were gathered near the entrance, their expressions steady but tense. The sound of distant shouting echoed alongside the rapid beeps of communication devices. Lucas felt his heart race as he shouted again, "Adam, it's Lucas," an officer warned, but just then a voice rang out from behind the officers. It was Adam, his face poorly lit by the fluorescent lights, emotions cascading through his features, fear, anger, despair. Lucas shouted back, trying to push through the barrier of officers, "You don't have to go through this alone." Adam's voice cracked, rife with tension. "I'm done. Things don't have to stay like this. You can talk to me." Lucas pressed, his chest tightening as he searched for the right words. Adam looked wild, eyes darting across the scene, and for a moment Lucas caught a glimpse of the boy who had once laughed beside him. "They won't listen," Lucas shouted, urgency gripping him. "You can find your voice again." In that moment, Adam hesitated, the battle within him visible. The tension in the air thickened, a taut line balancing hope and despair. The officers exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to proceed. Time felt like it stood still, each second pulling them into an abyss of uncertainty. "Adam," Lucas continued, lowering his voice to a gentle, firm tone, "you need to remember who you are. You have friends who care about you. I care about you." As if grappling with the depths of darkness, Adam's breathing began to slow, uncertainty mixing with dawning realization. Lucas could see the flicker of recognition in his friend's eyes, the potential for choice, the gnawing desire to break free. "Okay," Adam finally responded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I promise," Lucas said, the relief washing over him. Slowly, the barricade of officers began to yield as Adam stepped closer to the entrance, his body tense but ready. "I don't want to be this person anymore." The officer nearest stepped forward, his hands open in a gesture of peace, ready to listen. "We're here to help you, Adam." Lucas felt a surge of hope. They were standing on the precipice of change, his heart racing as the door to understanding began to creak open. "I didn't mean to scare anyone," Adam said, raw vulnerability etching his words. "Then let us help you rise above that," Lucas encouraged, stepping closer, feeling the power of connection. "You're not alone." As Adam began to speak, sharing his truth, the atmosphere shifted. The officers listened attentively. With every word, the connection between them deepened, bringing light into the darkness. But just as hope began to flourish, a sudden shout echoed through the crowd. A voice yelled and the chaos erupted again. Lucas turned, adrenaline spiking as he realized. The unthinkable had begun. The officers rushed toward Adam, and in that moment all hell broke loose. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as he saw the scene shift. A figure appeared at the edge of the crowd, shouting, pushing toward the chaos, and the air thickened with tension. Lucas shouted as fear etched across his face, uncertainty replacing hope. He had fought so hard to bring Adam back to reach him. But in that instant, he became aware of the growing crowd behind him, the panic, the chaos. Adam's eyes flared with alarm, confusion flooding his features. What had begun as a moment of possible redemption now seemed to unravel, holding them all on the edge of catastrophe. As fear and anxiety hung in the air like a thick fog, Lucas felt a chilling realization seep into his bones. This fight for Adam's freedom wasn't over. The stakes were rising. The question lingered, could they pull him back from the brink, or would this spiral out of control, taking them all down in its chaos? Every heartbeat echoed with uncertainty as they stood, teetering on the edge, every second feeling heavier with the potential for disaster.